Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. I'm Emily, your host. Today, we're jumping into something pretty significant that's popped up across the pond. Former U.S. President Donald Trump. He's announced that a major trade deal with the UK would be, well, a top priority if he gets back into office. Now, announcements like this, they always send ripples, don't they, through economies, political scenes, and that's exactly what we want to unpack with you today.
Absolutely. This isn't just, dry numbers about tariffs. It really gets to the heart of the future relationship between two major global players. And the implications, they definitely stretch further than just London and Washington.
Exactly. So we've gathered various news reports, some expert analysis to really dig into what this potential deal might mean. Our goal here is to get past the headlines, give you a clearer picture of the economic shifts, the politics, the diplomacy that could be coming down the line. And to help us navigate all this complexity, we're really pleased to have back with us a senior international trade analyst, formerly an advisor to the UK's Department for International Trade. Welcome.
Thanks. It's great to be back. And like you said, this is quite fresh news, which, makes talking about it now really timely, really important.
Okay, let's get right to it then. Donald Trump's throwing this out there. What exactly did he say? And what's the sort of bigger picture here, the context we need?
Well, he stated pretty clearly that getting a comprehensive bilateral trade deal with the UK would be a key aim if he wins in November. The background is, well, it's layered. We've got instability in global supply chains, right? And maybe some tiredness with those huge, complex, multilateral deals like, remember TTIP? That ultimately just stalled for the UK, obviously, post-Brexit. U.S. trade deal has been a big goal, so this fits that ambition. And from the U.S. side, it lines up with the America First idea, but maybe also shows a willingness for, let's call it selective globalism, focusing deals on allies you trust.
Selective globalism, I like that. So what about the timing, the political thinking behind this announcement now, particularly for Trump?
Well, a big part of Trump's appeal has always been that economic nationalism focus, hasn't it? Prioritizing American interests. So by highlighting a potential deal with a close ally, like the UK, he can project strength, decisiveness, show he can deliver economic wins for the U.S. but still operate internationally. It definitely signals a preference for those direct one-on-one talks where the U.S. probably feels it have more leverage, rather than the compromises involved in bigger groups. And of course, focusing on a partner like the UK, historically close, ideologically aligned, that probably plays well with his base.
Okay, so let's zero in on the UK then. The US is already a huge trading partner. So what are the actual potential economic upsides for the UK if this deal happens?
Yeah, the US is the UK's biggest single country partner right now. The links are already massive. A formal deal could really deepen that. You'd likely see tariff reductions, making UK exports cheaper over there, and really importantly, potentially mutual recognition of standards. Think about that. If both sides agree their rules in a sector are basically equivalent, that cuts costs, cuts complexity for businesses massively. Key UK sectors like finance in the City of London, pharmaceuticals, maybe even high-end food and drink exports, they could get much better access. Some studies suggest, over a decade, the gains could be in the tens of billions of pounds for the UK economy.
Okay, tens of billions. But you mentioned UK agriculture, hinted it was maybe more complicated. What's the other side of that?
Yeah. Exactly. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. Greater access to the huge U.S. market. That could be great for some UK farmers. But, and this is a big but, there are real worries about food standards. The UK public, many farmers too, are very uneasy about certain U.S. agricultural practices, things like chlorinated chicken washes, hormone-treated beef. There's genuine fear a deal could force the UK to lower its own standards, which are often higher. Sure. Or, that UK producers could just be undercut by cheaper U.S. imports produced to different standards. It's politically very, very sensitive.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the likely sticking points, doesn't it? Beyond farming, what other areas are likely to cause friction, maybe opposition?
Well, one issue that always comes up in U.S.-UK trade talks is the NHS. Access for U.S. drug companies, healthcare providers. There's incredibly strong public feeling in the UK against anything seen as undermining the NHS's core principles. Worries about drug prices going up or pressure towards privatization. That's always a flashpoint. Then there's digital regulation. The U.S. and UK kind of have different approaches to data privacy, how you regulate the big tech firms. Finding common ground there in a trade deal could be pretty tricky and politically charged, too.
So, politically, any UK government pushing this would be walking a real tightrope.
Oh, absolutely. Public perception is everything here. If critics successfully frame the deal as weakening consumer safety or putting the NHS at risk or being unfair to UK firms, it could face huge political backlash. So the government would need really clear messaging, careful management of expectations. Crucial.
Now, thinking about the UK post-Brexit, how might a big U.S. trade deal impact its relationship with the EU?
Yes. This is where it gets particularly delicate. If a US-UK deal leads to the UK significantly changing its regulations, especially in areas covered by the Northern Ireland Protocol, like food safety, product standards, that could create real problems with the EU. Brussels will be watching like a hawk. They won't want the UK lowering standards to align with the US while still having easy access to the EU market. That's seen as unfair competition. It's a real balancing act for the UK, isn't it? Trying to get closer to Washington without damaging that vital EU relationship right next door.
Sounds incredibly complex. Let's flip it back to the U.S. side then. Beyond the politics of landing a big deal, what actual economic gains would the U.S. be looking for from the UK?
Well, apart from the political win, the U.S. would definitely be looking for better access to the U.K. market. It's a big, relatively wealthy market. So for U.S. agriculture, pharmaceuticals, tech services, getting barriers lowered would be a plus. And there's a geopolitical angle too, I think. Strengthening economic ties with a key ally like the UK helps reinforce that Anglosphere idea. It presents a more united economic front, especially when you think about global competition, particularly with China.
And you mentioned this fitting into a potential wider Trump doctrine on trade. What might that look like generally?
Based on his track record and statements, a Trump trade doctrine would likely keep prioritizing those one-on-one bilateral deals over the big multilateral ones. The focus would be very much on what are seen as direct, quick wins for the U.S. economy. We'd probably see a continued strong focus on reducing trade deficits, and possibly using trade more as a lever in foreign policy, rewarding allies with deals, but also being quick to use tariffs if U.S. interests are seen as threatened. That emphasis on loyalty among allies we talked about fits right in.
Right. Now, getting these huge deals actually signed and delivered means navigating a whole maze of legal and regulatory stuff. What kind of hurdles might this US-UK deal face in both countries?
Sure. In the U.S., any big trade deal needs Congress to approve it. And with the political divisions there, getting broad bipartisan support could be tough. Democrats especially would likely look very closely at things like labor rights, environmental standards in the deal. In the UK, Parliament has to ratify it. You could see significant debate, opposition from different parties, and potentially objections from the devolved governments, Scotland, Northern Ireland, if they feel their specific interests aren't covered or harmed.
And is there a real chance of legal challenges popping up even after a deal is agreed?
Oh, it's definitely possible. Not something you can rule out. You can see legal challenges around, say, how powers are split between the UK government and the devolved nations, especially if there are arguments over things like farming regulations or how public contracts are awarded.
Okay, zooming out again, the global view. What broader geopolitical signal would a completed US-UK trade deal send out?
Well, it would certainly boost the narrative of the special relationship being strong and relevant. It might suggest a bit of a pivot in UK trade policy, more towards Washington after leaving the EU's orbit. And more broadly, it would probably be seen as another sign of this global shift towards bilateralism in trade, especially if other similar deals follow.
And any specific message to China in all this, given the current climate?
I think it would be read, partly at least, as an effort to shore up economic links between Western democracies, shared values, strategic interests, potentially as a bit of a counterweight to China's increasing economic influence globally. It signals the U.S. wanting to solidify alliances with nations it sees as like-minded.
Let's try and look ahead a bit. If this deal gets done, say, in the next year or two, what might the UK look like economically and in terms of its trade identity maybe 5 years later?
Okay, crystal ball time. If it's a good deal, well negotiated, hitting key sectors without giving too much away on standards, you might see a modest GDP bump for the UK, perhaps 1%, maybe 2% over the medium term. That's plausible. But if it's rushed or driven more by politics than economics, the UK could end up sort of stuck in the middle, squeezed between US and EU regulations. That's a risk. Longer term, a big U.S. deal could definitely speed up a shift in the UK's identity. More Atlantic-focused, less European-centric in its trade outlook, the stakes are undoubtedly high. This could really be a defining move for post-Brexit Britain one way or another.
And finally, before we wrap this up, what's the initial buzz been like? Public reaction, press reaction in the U.S. and UK to the announcement?
In the U.S., it's generally been framed positively by Trump supporters, right-leaning media, an America First win, good for exports.
Yeah.
In the UK, it's been more mixed, more cautious, I'd say. Right-wing press, generally more enthusiastic. Center, left-leaning outlets raising those concerns. We discussed food standards, the NHS especially. Public opinion seems, well, cautiously interested in the economic potential, maybe, but definitely wary about lowering standards or affecting public services.
And how much sway could that initial media narrative have on whether a deal actually happens?
Well, media framing can be hugely influential. It really shapes public opinion, which then shapes the politics around a big policy like this. If a strong story takes hold that the deal is bad for Britain, a sellout, that could build serious public opposition, making it much harder for any government to get it through Parliament.
Well, thank you so much. That's been incredibly insightful navigating all those complexities. If you had to leave our listeners with just one key takeaway message about this potential Trump-UK trade deal, what would it be?
Um, I'd say that while this prospect, this potential deal, offers real opportunities, it also comes with significant risks. Whether it ends up being a good move or, frankly, a misstep really depends on the nitty-gritty, the details of the negotiation. And critically, whether sound economic logic wins out over, short-term political theater.
That's a perfect way to summarize it. Thank you again for joining us on the deep dive. Hopefully this has given all of you listening a much clearer view of what this potential deal involves.
My pleasure. Always good to talk it through.
And thank you for tuning into this deep dive on Westferry Times. Please do subscribe to our channel, Westferry Times, for more analysis like this on key global developments. We'll definitely keep watching how this story unfolds. From me, Emily, goodbye for now.
And stay informed.